What makes One Piece such a real emotional story? One of those stories that genuinely can make you cry over a ship. And there are dozens, if not hundreds of stories that people will acclaim being really emotional and really drive you to tears and feel things, but I don't know if I've ever encountered a story like One Piece that consistently makes you care so deeply about even the most minor characters.
Facts.
And so today, Abe and I wanted to explore one of my favorite parts about the story, and that being character writing.
Shout out to the GOAT, Oda, because no one does it like him, man. Like, from the villains to the straight good guys to a lot of gray area complex characters. And also just some wild introductions, and then, long-standing or just really quick developments of characters. It's all over the place, but so consistently just top-notch, next-level writing.
Absolutely, and especially with Kuma's backstory unfurling recently, we really wanted to kind of focus in on this concept. I'm a huge fan of storytelling, so analyzing character story writing, whether it be backstories or, like you said, those morally gray characters, it's really intriguing to me. But with the story of One Piece, it's such an immense cast of people that there's no way we could really give our props to everybody. So instead, Abe and I wanted to go back and forth into some category questions that I wrote down for us today, so we could kind of give a spotlight to those characters that don't get as much love.
Hell yeah.
So do you wanna tee us off with our first question?
Yeah, I got you. Alright, so our first category. Favorite member of the Straw Hat crew pre-Timeskip. And this can include anyone that traveled on the ship. So for me, it was Robin. Nico Robin. See, because even when she was the bad guy, I just always loved her persona. She always came off as calm, collected, rarely showing any emotion, never seemed very concerned about the current situation. But then once we start to learn more about her, you start to really realize she went through some insane trauma, abandonment, from her mom to losing everyone she loves. And it really becomes clear why she's so closed off and just kind of does whatever she needs to survive. Even the whole reason she joined Luffy was because he refused to let her die when she wanted to, when he defeated Crocodile. Saying, why do I have to listen to you? And then later she said, well, then that's your crime. I wanted to die. You wouldn't let me, so now you have to put up with me.
Oh, absolutely. I definitely loved Robin's pre-Timeskip motivations being always kind of somewhat in question arc to arc. Even when she joined the crew after Skypiea, we were like, she went on an adventure with us, but can we really trust her? But then, after Water 7, obviously, she really started to cement with all the other crewmates.
Yeah, because she started, developing a very special role for the crew. I think the main one is obviously Chopper. She became almost like a mom to him. But then for Nami, she finally has a fellow girl friend to be with, go out shopping, do all girly stuff. And I also really liked how when Brook joins their crew, he's going around messing up, overthinking all these situations. And then she just kind of goes up to him and goes, you don't have to worry. You're fine here.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's so beautiful is the way that she finally came to fully kind of give in to Luffy and let go of all of her self, almost loathing, because, she had, honestly, a terrible, terrible childhood. Branded by the world government as a criminal. People telling her, you don't deserve to live. Your existence is a crime.
No, devil child. You're a demon.
Yeah. Straight up, just everyone wants you dead for existing. And everyone that she cared about was gone, killed in front of her, including her mother. And then that moment where, before she yells out, I want to live, and they're telling her, say it. We need to hear you say it.
Mm-hmm.
And, she has her flashbacks to all of the bad things she's heard, but then the words of Saul also, where he said, the world is vast. You're going to find Nakama who will take care of you and protect you. And then she realized, like, it's these guys. It's the Straw Hats. And I also just think it's really poetic that when they went to go save her, it's Nami who tells Luffy, hey, I know you think that she betrayed us. She actually sacrificed herself. She's trying to give up her life for us. And that was the moment where he went, oh, she was lying? Good. And it was beautiful because Nami went through basically the same
whole
thing.
Arlong Park all over again.
Arlong Park, yeah. It's that entire thing just relived of, oh, all right, she's actually a great person. She just doesn't want to show it. But we still know. We still know that that's who she is.
No, absolutely. I mean, Nami's Will You Help Me and Robin's I Want to Live are probably two of the most emotionally packed moments of the Pre-Timeskip story.
Definitely.
It's very human. Like, it makes you really understand, like, this is a very common human emotion. And that actually kind of ties in to my favorite Pre-Timeskip crewmate, and that's Usopp. Usopp is a character that it's very easy to clown on him, I'm going to say, especially in the current story, because where we're at in terms of strength and where we're doing, he's not like a standout per se. But that's what I really liked about him in the Pre-Timeskip. He was very human. He's always kind of been the human stand-in for what it would be like if anyone from the real world went there. But he's still so smart. He's innovative. He's got so many well-character written moments in the first Timeskip. And, I mean, you can look through his fights alone just to find some really great character moments for Usopp. Listing through his fights, it goes Chew, Mr. Four, Miss Merry Christmas, that duel fight with Chopper, and then his fight with Luffy, and then Perona. Nothing on Chew, but he's not really the most standout, but I mean, like, let's think about it. Miss Merry Christmas and Mr. Four, he was the first Straw Hat to have a Luffy will be the Pirate King moment. And those are some of the most hyped moments in the story now. He was the one that set that all in motion. And then, because of that feeling of super loyal commitment to Luffy and all of that, it makes Luffy versus Usopp hit that much harder because it's just a huge personal struggle.
That fight caught me so off guard when I watched it because it was 0 to 60 so quick.
He was just boiling over and over again, where he sees the ship falling apart, and he sees himself in that. And he's like, man, if this can be left behind, what about me? That's a very, very human struggle I think a lot of people go through, where it's like, what is my purpose?
Well, and that was right after he got absolutely disrespected and then had to be saved like a damsel in distress, basically, too, by the Frankie family.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just that vulnerability is what I really liked about Usopp Pre-Timeskip. He was vulnerable and he was negative, and that actually helps in his fight against Perona.
Yeah.
You can make a joke out of that, but like, he was self-deprecating to the point where he was so not confident in himself. Negative didn't affect him, but he still keeps going. He keeps innovating. He keeps committing himself, and I love that about Pre-Timeskip Usopp.
Also, if we want to tie our two favorite people together, him shooting that flag as the Sniper King was so badass. And like, I think that's also a moment where Robin was like, oh, they're for real, for real.
Mm-hmm. That symbology of, we will burn the flag of the world rulers.
We will go up against the entire world government for you. Just for you.
That's chills.
Yeah.
But I think we leave that there. Let's head into our next question. We wanted to give a little bit of love to the Marine side. Obviously not as favorable for some people. But I wanted to ask our favorite non-Admiral Marine, because it's very easy to love the Admirals. They're the strongest ones we've seen. So maybe moving the spotlight away from that.
Yeah, so for me, might be a little bit of a shocker. I actually really enjoy Smoker. So he reminds me of both Garp and Fujitora in that he's one of the few Marines that seem to really have their own moral compass, and while they follow the majority of the government's laws and rules and regulations and all that, they still also at times will just be like, nah, I'm gonna do my own thing. Like, I don't agree. And even after becoming one of the earliest adversaries of the Straw Hats, and really like dedicating himself to I'm going to catch Luffy one day, he still multiple times actually helps them out as the story goes on. I mean, after Luffy makes Zoro save him, he basically just gives them a freebie of, you guys can go while they're in Alabasta when all of the other Marines are searching for him.
Mm-hmm.
He refuses to take credit for defeating Crocodile. He was actually disgusted that the government was trying to give him that, because he said, I'm not taking another man's credit, even if they are pirates. Which, to me, respect for that. Like, that's holding it, like...
That humility and honesty.
And honor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead.
No, yeah, I just wanted to comment on that. I mean, I think a lot of people's hate from Smoker came from what you're talking about. Like, early on, he was one of the most impressive fighters we had. In Lockdown, if it wasn't for Dragon, Luffy's done.
Luffy was done, yeah.
We had nothing on him without Haki. I think his character more got power scaled out, but that connection between him and Luffy, where it seems like he's kind of the Garp to Roger, that he's trying to be that for this new generation for Luffy.
Yeah.
And that's like a really hard mantle to live up to, but it's super honorable the way he goes at it, just like Garp, where he's like, I'm not taking credit for dirty work. I'm doing it the right way.
Yeah, because it wasn't him. And then also in Punk Hazard, I mean, he still fights with them at some points, but he also realized, like, we need to form a short alliance here, like, for the betterment of the kids they're saving, and stopping Caesar Clown and all that, like, that was going on. And then I think he really does. I feel like I'm not misremembering this. I feel like I remember him even stating that he sees similarities between Luffy and Roger.
I think a lot of that was when he saw him on the execution platform.
Yeah, okay.
Because he's like, he's smiling, but he's gonna die.
Yeah.
But he's smiling.
Crazy.
He's insane.
He is insane. And it's like, despite all those things, he still has that dedication of, I am going to catch him. Like, this is my end goal. Like, I want to be the one to capture him, which, like, I respect the hustle. My man is dedicated. And, like, let's be real, he has a pretty badass power. And I also just like that he's always puffing on a cigar, too. He's true to his name.
I always thought that was honestly so he would have a constant smoke source. But he's also a Logia, so it doesn't really matter.
I think he just developed, like, this is who I am. I'm gonna... like, his demeanor just took over.
My favorite non-Admiral character... I feel like this is kind of a pigeonhole because he could have been an admiral but chose not to be, but it's someone you mentioned, and it's Garp.
Yeah.
And it's easy to love Garp. He's very similar to Luffy. He's got a very non-serious demeanor most of the time, and he's super powerful. He has an epithet as the hero of the Marines. Like, he stands out. It's easy to notice this guy. But what I like is that he's such a unique character for who he is, if you think about it. He is a D. He's a member of the Monkey D family, who are notorious for causing huge problems for the world. And he is the hero of that organization that works for the world government. But he is so aware that it's a corrupt system, he actively refuses advancement because he still wants the freedom like all the other D do. It's such a unique situation to put a character like that with so much prominence and so much history tied into him. I could never, fully appreciate it, though, until Marineford.
Yes. Marineford brought out so much of his character.
Especially leading up to it. I mean, his talks with Ace were really emotionally packed. I didn't know he had that as a character until those conversations, because
you could hear the pain.
Yeah,
you could hear the pain.
This is the same guy that threw his grandkids into the jungle to train. You could understand why you think he would maybe not care, but seeing how much it cuts him up to know he can do nothing and just wishing he could go back and change the decisions for these people he loves.
Because he's like, I always wanted what was best for you. I just wanted you...
Why didn't you listen?
Yeah. He earnestly just wanted Ace to live a good life.
Absolutely. And then seeing him just sit on the execution platform at Marineford, this is the hero of the Marines, and he's sitting there crying with his grandson. That whole concept is just so emotionally palpable.
Yeah.
I've never seen a character so conflicted by the situation they put themselves in, by who they truly are, like Garp. And it's just something I always come back to, especially seeing him in the modern story. But I guess that kind of leads us into some more enemies of the story, I would guess.
Yeah.
One Piece obviously has some incredible antagonists.
Oh.
You can go down the list. Doflamingo, iconic. Kaido took 2.5 years to fight. Like, there's just beast after beast. But
Big Mom killed her own kid.
she did. She's dark. But a lot of the thing that makes a lot of the antagonists stand out to me was the crew they surround themselves with. So we wanted to kind of explore, who do you think is the most memorable antagonist subordinate?
So for me, this was a pretty easy one. Senior Pink. He's always stuck out to me, and I think part of it is just how genuinely like good of a person this was on Doflamingo's crew. Like,
I mean, he was kind of a monster till before his wife.
right. But then he truly changed into such a good person.
No,
like,
absolutely.
He found his humanity. And yeah, he didn't tell her the truth. You know, he obviously still was doing pirate things. But I mean, once you realize, like, the way he dresses obviously makes him memorable, as is giant man baby.
Mm-hmm.
But then you realize he's doing this to send love to his wife and their deceased son. Like, that hits so deep. And the whole, like, hard-boiled persona thing that he has. Then with his fight with Frankie, multiple times, you see the exact opposite. You see a guy who truly cares about life and the people around him. Frankie gets him to abandon the fight at one point by lying about, I think you hear women in distress. And then when he finds out he was lying, he's, like, obviously upset about it. But he's still like, well, at least there's not a woman in distress. Like, that's admirable. You know, that's like Sanji. Like,
That's very Sanji.
That's very Sanji of him. And then, you know, they're in the middle of their fight, and he protects a random cat from getting hurt. And even Frankie at that point was like, I think he cried, because Frankie cries at everything. But, you know, he was like, wait, this dude's cool. Like, this is a nice guy. And then, just the way the fight ends. The fact that he says, I will concede defeat if you can survive this finishing move. Frankie does, and then he truly concedes defeat. He's like, all right, you got it, you won. And that, you know, at that point, Frankie's like, I want to, like, just have a beer with you, get to know you, and hear your story. Because he realized, like, this guy might be on the villain's side, but he does not act like a typical villain at all.
No, I mean, I think the Senior Pink flashback hit people like a truck.
Like a train!
Everybody going into it was like, this dude's kind of weird.
Yes.
He's got a lot of girls surrounding him. I wonder what he's like. And then you see his backstory and it's just like, oh my god, why would you do this?
Yeah, I feel bad for roasting him. Because I was when I saw, like, Big Baby. Like,
when I saw you put that he protected the random cat in the script, I honestly forgot that, and that is hilarious. Because you contrast that to somebody like Boa, who kicks a seal and a dog and a cat just for being in her way. It's
like,
hilarious.
She's supposed to be a good person.
Yeah, that's like Luffy's love interest, quote unquote. And then you
her.
see Senior Pink, and it's like, no, I need to protect this cat. That's a hard-boiled man right there.
Hell yeah.
I think I also have a bit of a hard-boiled individual. And I wouldn't say he's necessarily overlooked, so that doesn't necessarily follow my own prompt that well. But he is a character that I think the reason he's loved isn't for necessarily the right reasons I love him. And that's Katakuri. Katakuri is undeniably one of the coldest looking characters in the entire show.
Oh yeah, and this fight with Luffy goes crazy.
It goes insane. It's, I think, still his longest fight. I guess we didn't get the time limit on the Kaido fight, but he fought that man for 12 hours.
Yeah.
Like, he was going toe to toe with him, and what made it interesting isn't to me just the fact that he's badass, but like the reason behind why he put up this front of like, I'm the perfect man. I've never touched my back. Like, what? You hear what you're saying? You've never touched your back?
Weird flex.
But like, that sounds so cool. But when you find out about it, it's like, yeah, he's got this persona where it's like, he is unbeaten. He is the man that can protect everybody. And it's for his family, because he's so worried about what other people would think of him if they saw otherwise. Going kind of back to my Usopp point, seeing that kind of like very humane struggle of perception.
It definitely humanizes him.
Yeah, from a character that seems so awesome at first. One that everyone's like, oh, I want to be like him. And it's like, he goes through the same struggles everybody else does.
He's worried about his family. He wants to protect them.
He wants to protect himself from the things he's not confident in. He wants to protect his...
judged.
Yeah, he wants to protect his family from being judged for the same way, like Brule, for not being the most aesthetically pleasing person. And then over time, he's got like his own Nakama experience where Luffy opened his eyes up to showing him that it's like, hey, it's okay that other people aren't gonna like you as long as the people that love you are still with you. That came from a fight.
Yeah. Well,
we got character development in a fight.
They're actively throwing hands.
Like, that's insane. And obviously people love him because it's like, that fight was, like you said, top tier. The animation was awesome. There was some cool moments throughout the whole thing. But I will never forget his character, and the fact that his character was essentially what decided what ended that fight too. He said, okay, you're somebody I can respect enough that I think you're genuinely going to achieve your dreams, and you've inspired me to do the same. I will concede. Holy crap.
You gotta think, him saying that, Luffy's dreams directly
counteract his mother's.
Yeah, exactly. Because she wants to be...
He asked, will you come back and defeat her? And he said, absolutely.
And he still let him go. Like,
that's why he let him go.
Yeah.
That character development mid-fight is something I think needs to be shouted out more than it is now. But that also kind of translates to our next question, if you want to take this one.
Yeah, I got you. So there are a lot of characters who kind of get not even necessarily forgotten, but definitely underappreciated, where people just see them as an annoyance or like an extra bit of the story that they don't really want to see because they want to see all the cool fights. They want to get on with, like, you know, seeing Gear 5, all that great stuff. But the next question is, what character do you think is underappreciated? And for me, that is absolutely Hiyori. Because with her parents dead, brother gone, never knowing when she's going to see him again, if she's going to see him again, Hiyori had to take on an identity which literally made her a sexualized servant to the man who betrayed and had her father killed and was oppressing her people, Orochi. Like, that's crazy. That's so much trauma. And then she used that role to get back at some of the immoral men in Orochi's new hell of a kingdom and gave it to Genjiro to distribute to the poor. Like, she had to undergo just the worst possible situation and still found ways to use it for good. And, like, she might not be a samurai. She's not out there fighting in the big battle. But she absolutely, you could tell, was a descendant of some of the greatest samurai. She was Odin's child.
No doubt. I mean, also shout out Denjiro for being there.
Oh, yeah.
It would have been way worse without him.
Oh, yeah. He held her down. And he got her out. He helped her stage her death. Mm-hmm. You know, when things started to really hit the fan near the beginning of Wano. But man, from early on, when she realizes that she's going to finally be reunited with Momo, she refuses to cry out of pride. That's such a samurai mindset. And then, I mean, it may have been a little bit influenced by her feelings for him, because it's very clear she feels some type of way about Zoro. But she recognized that he was worthy of wielding Enma. And so, in exchange, and she did it also to get back, you know, the prize of Wano, the long lost sword. Is it
Shisui, I think it's called?
Yeah, see, I can never pronounce it. But, you know, she wasn't just going to be like, I need that back. She said, you are worthy of wielding truly one of the most legendary blades of all time. And then, I feel like people don't appreciate her role in killing Orochi, and just because of how much she had to endure with him for 20 years. Like, I get it that we all wanted to see Gear 5, but what she was doing was just as important and like fundamental to freeing the land of Wano. It was very representative, and she deserved to be the one because she had been shouldering that for 20 years. She was looking out for the people while also living amongst the snake.
I think there's two things that did her character wrong, and you're hitting it right on the head. It got sandwiched in between the Gear 5 episode and chapter, which is, you can't compete with Oda pulling the rug out from 25 years of what his fruit is. And then...
Oh, he's a god?
Oh,
show us that!
But also, Genjiro giving the final blow kind of undermined... I honestly think I would have liked it more if it was her doing it.
Yeah.
But you're right. You can't undermine what that means to her character. We didn't see those 20 years, but those 20 years happened. She went through all of it. She grew up into a woman with this being her life, just hoping on her mother's last words that they actually will come in the future and help us.
She didn't even know.
Because they didn't come back to Wano immediately. They went outwards to get help, and she had no idea that they were even there. Yeah. I totally agree that she is somebody that's underappreciated.
Also, just her line about the Kurozumi were made to burn.
That didn't do her help. People were like, "Oh no, more genocide."
Hey, they were made to burn.
I agree though that it was cold.
She had her moment.
Speaking of cool characters, though, that kind of leads me into mine, and that would be Mr. Mont Blanc Nolan.
This was a good one. I like that you called him out.
He's so underloved. He's in one flashback, but retrospectively, in One Piece there's like 3 major important date periods. The Void Century, going all the way back hundreds and hundreds of years. There is apparently 300 years ago, and that was the same time with Nolan, around that time. And then there's the current time. He is one of the only people we know about from this entire era, but it is totally worth knowing about him because he is a botanist with some of the most ridiculous accomplishments you could imagine. He
discovered Sky Island.
He made Roger and Luffy are the only other people we see go to Sky Island. I guess Bellamy went because he admitted it to Luffy, but whatever.
Yeah, forget him.
But also, Nolan did this as like the only competent member of his entire crew. We see in the flashback, he's like, "Oh, I have the observational haki to hear the bell from miles away, fight a sea king in the ocean by myself to feed us and get us there."
Which, that's a hell of a feat in itself.
And then recognize when I get there this disease immediately, put my life on the line for this complete stranger, only because I know that I can do them more good than whatever their religion is doing. That is a huge symbology to stand against. But he's such a bigger-than-life character that seems so at home in this adventure world that it just makes sense. And the fact that his whole connection with Kagura is easily one of the best flashbacks in the whole story. But the fact that he's thinking about Kagura as he's about to die too, and he's like, "I'm sorry I couldn't see you again." And not the fact that he's like, "Oh, I failed to get them to the City of Gold." Oh man, that hits.
Yeah, that's also like a near Jesus moment where it's like, "I'm willing to die for what I know is true. You guys just won't believe me." Like,
no, absolutely.
I'm not going to say, like, this is what I saw. I'm telling you it's the truth. Don't believe me? Go ahead and kill me. That's the truth. And he was willing to die by that.
I wouldn't be surprised if Nolan was a D character.
I wouldn't either, honestly.
People, they write in the book that he was crying when he was dying, but you can see how the world government has altered propaganda over
they're
the
the real
centuries.
liars. They're the real liars.
So, it wouldn't surprise me, but like, I don't know, obviously he's a really cool character that is kind of shoved into this part of the story that some people might not even appreciate as much as the rest of it, because it feels a bit separate. But the bigger thing is like, I don't know, the message between him just being able to develop a brotherhood with somebody that looks completely different, thinks completely different, comes from a whole different world, but it's more just about, will you extend the hand to understand somebody? Will you take the chance to trust your fellow man? That is a very pertinent message that we have going on today.
It is.
Compared to all the conflicts we see throughout the world. And I think that he deserves more props for being able to introduce that kind of theme into the story.
Absolutely. With all the history and background that we're starting to get on, the Void Century and all the things that have happened in the past, once we get to Elbaf especially, I would love if Nolan made another appearance in some of the lore to One Piece. I could definitely see him having another part, or at least making a resurgence in all of, his Sky Island stuff. I feel like it could definitely come back again.
If I'm not mistaken, didn't he have a statue in Dressrosa for the Tontada?
He may have.
I think he did, because they called him Usaland.
So
because it was no.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, dude. Yeah, he could definitely make another comeback and have had more to do than we even realize yet.
He's a great character. I'm glad that you agree.
That was a good call.
But since we're kind of looking backwards, I think that leads us perfectly into our next question. And it's something that One Piece is notorious for. That being the backstory. Almost everybody just has the most tragic backstory besides, like, Zoro. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, it's still sad. It's just
it is sad, yeah.
Less sad in comparison.
Less trauma.
Yeah.
Yet he acts as the edgiest character. But the question obviously is, what character has your favorite backstory?
So, you could kind of look at this as a group because it all kind of happened at once. But for me, it's the ASC backstory. Ace, Sabo, and Crybaby Luffy. Because, at first I put Sabo, but then I realized it was also just as much Ace and Luffy at the same time. And it's just that entire arc is just so much emotion. Like, even the opening song gets me right here. The timing right after Ace's death and just seeing the childhood innocence.
The timing was tragic.
Oh man, I was so not prepared. Like, I was still recovering from, he just lost his brother. And then I had to watch them grow up together. And, like, you see Luffy go from obnoxious dumbass to lovable dumbass. That's the joy boy in him. They just couldn't escape it. He was gonna become part of their group. You see a lot more of the depth of just how much Ace truly struggled with being Roger's son and how much he honestly came to despise him for his blood.
Not just that, but also how much Ace means to Luffy. I know you wrote down, like, especially after they thought Sabo died.
After they think Sabo dies, it's that promise that he makes that I will never die. Like, I'll never leave you. I'll always be here. And then you realize what Luffy meant when he was holding him, that you promised. You said you'd never leave. Oh man, I'm gonna start tearing up just thinking about this now. But then also Sabo, his true disgust in his heritage as a noble. That's why he joins Ace in the first place, is he hates his family, he hates being royalty, he just wants to run around and be a little delinquent.
And then seeing him not even being able to help any of this because of his amnesia.
Yeah. Well, and even before that, his interaction with Dragon, when Dragon, he says, I'm ashamed of my blood, I'm ashamed of who I am, and it blew Dragon's mind that they finally done it. They finally made a child
of the royal
family say this, hate where he comes from. Yeah, and then also just to realize that, he had that amnesia, and it didn't even hit him until he saw the news of Ace. Could you imagine that?
Until it was too late?
Yeah, after it had happened, to suddenly have all that come back and go, oh, that's my brother that just died?
Not only do I have a brother, but he's
gone. He just died in my other brother's arms. Oh, man. That would make sense why he was pretty defensive of Luffy and, wanted to take his place in the fight in Dressrosa.
In the Coliseum.
Yeah, in the Coliseum.
No, I think that was honestly one of the first times where we got to see Luffy's backstory too, and aside from his time with Shanks. And man,
that for me had the emotional whiplash that we just got through with Kuma, of seeing how much how much that man went through. It was a lot of saying, how much pain Luffy truly was in right now, because to him he had just lost his only other. He had already lost two. He lost both brothers now, you know, and like, oh, man, he was going through it. And I mean, that arc still had its moments of, you know, funny, happy, you know, melancholy stuff. You got Dada and Garp just being, one, hilarious, and two, just their tough love approach to, like, can't stand these shithead kids. Mm-hmm. But, oh man, it's just, that one always just hits me so directly. And it just means so much for both Luffy and Sabo as characters, and gives Ace even more depth too. That one takes the cake for me as far as backstories go.
No, that's a very great selection. I'm gonna actually kind of piggyback off of that emotional train. They're all really emotional if you think about it. No one's happy until they meet Luffy, and then they're happy. One Piece fans included. Mm-hmm.
Facts.
But my selection is one of our own crewmates, but it's actually Chopper's backstory. His connection with Dr. Heroluck. This was the first backstory in the story that made me realize just how much emotion Oda could evoke out of a few chapters, because this is a reindeer that became a human and was ostracized for that. And that makes you feel bad already. And then he finds the one person in the world that will connect to him being this absolute quack. Horrible doctor doing way more damage than good. But he also has such a golden heart that he created the most wholesome character in the show. But also, seeing him try to protect that relationship is what costs the doctor his life. It's not like the biggest plot twist in the world, but man, the first time I saw that, I just got choked up. It was like, oh my god. And then to follow that up with his speech that he gives before his death in the presentation to Wapol, from start to finish, just Heroluck is one of the weirdest characters, but made such a huge part of that backstory.
What was also just such a great moment of resolution for how sad that backstory was when Doctorine? When she released all of the
cherry blossoms.
The cherry blossoms while Chopper was leaving, you know, after obviously giving him the the fake get out of here, to give him that final send off and make the doctor's ultimate wish come true. That was beautiful. And like I felt some type of way when that happened, and Chopper rightfully was bawling his eyes out, because this is what his best friend, his, you know, inspiration to save people, this was his dream, and they finally fulfilled his dream.
No, absolutely. He could also have been put in the underrated characters category, honestly, but I wanted to give a special shout out to Heroluck, because not only did he make Chopper's heart of gold, but he also had that one random line telling him Chopper about pirates, where he foreshadowed all three types of hockey, where he's talking about they have the arms to withstand everything in the armament hockey, and they have the eyes of a hawk with observation hockey, and the soul to make the sea tremble with conquerors.
Yo, I didn't even think about that.
Heroluck got that foresight. He was a pirate. He knows about that life.
Yeah. He's about it.
But he also, I mean, just from start to finish, a great backstory that is never too in your face about making it over the top, but just very, very emotional. I mean, I guess we can kind of transition this into our next one. We talked about a few characters that died in the previous category, but let's look at the opposite side of that spectrum and say, what are some characters that you think their story is still unfinished in the story? And this is one that we both seem like we couldn't pick one answer for.
Yeah. So we went with three, rule of threes. So it might kind of all, I feel like, have a little bit of connection to one another. So first off, Trafalgar Law absolutely is not done. The last we saw him, he was defeated by Blackbeard and, you know, barely clinging on to life. But he did get saved and escaped into the sea with Rumbleball Beppo. And I just don't think that with his power alone, there's no way he's done. With the ability to give someone eternal life, but then also having to sacrifice his own, that has to come back. We've already heard mentions of it from the revolutionaries, and, you know, speculation that it was probably performed on Eam, and I just feel like that has to come up again. And then that brings up the question of, you know, maybe he has been beaten to a point where he might not have it in him to recover. Who could he maybe perform the surgery on? I actually didn't realize this, but this was one of your first videos. Could it be Luffy? Could it be Robin? I think there's a lot of merit there. I remember us having the conversation, and I think there's some good reasoning out there that you could make for a couple different characters. But I absolutely think that is going to have a part in the end game of the story.
No, absolutely, and I'll link that video in the description for anyone interested, but that immortality surgery is a huge Chekhov's gun sitting on Oda's wall that he is not going to let go to waste.
Yeah, and he's referenced it multiple times. And there's the whole statement of him to Corazon about he wants to figure out the meaning behind this checkered fate, which takes me to the next character, Sabo. Sabo obviously has a lot more left to be told, as another checkered fate, as explicitly stated by the Gorosei. He's the new face of the revolution. He has ties to multiple D-Clan members, and he is one of the only people who knows about the Gorosei's true form, King Cobra's death, and then there's also just the fact that he's the new wielder of Ace's fruit. And it just would seem very poetic that he would be the one, as with the fruit of the son of Roger, to help the Pirate King and also fulfill Ace's dying wish of protecting Luffy and seeing him become the Pirate King. And then my last one, who is also a bit tied to Sabo, is Vivi, because we've learned that her family definitely has some deep ties to the mystery of Imu, the Void Century, the origin of the Gorosei, just all of that. And I am very interested to see what becomes of her in the story. Does she rejoin the Straw Hats? Does she stay, with Morgans and Wapol? What's going to become of their connection to Egghead? And then there's also just the fact that she was the first honorary Straw Hat. Shout out the X on their arm. And I think it would also be interesting with all that's going on with the Cross Guild of seeing Crocodile come back into the story and, potentially see Vivi again, because we know they have an insane history as well.
I think those are all characters that absolutely could show up again. I honestly think Vivi's probably going to show up very soon.
Yes.
In the story, especially with Morgans and Wapol being so close. But I absolutely agree. Also, shout out to Sad Boy being Sabo's D name that Ace gave him, because that's iconic.
That's hilarious.
But I also had 3 characters that I think I want to see come back in the story and at least flesh them out a bit more. But to varying degrees of depth, I would say. My first is going to be Bonnie. This is partially recency bias, I suppose, but her inclusion in Kuma's backstory honestly kind of had me slowly convinced that it was her backstory.
Yeah. Over
time, once she was born. Up until then, it was definitely Kuma's backstory, but once she came along, everything Kuma did was for her. She is only 12 years old. She has a power that we have no idea the full concept of its abilities, but she can distort her own future to have Nika-like powers. She has already been washed by Cypherpole agents, been her own pirate captain, has connections to Vegapunk, Kizaru, Sentomaru, inherited all of Kuma's memories. She has so much potential to do anything she wants in the story.
She's right there with Luffy, honestly, with some of that.
She absolutely could be an MC.
That's a lot, yeah.
She could be tied to any of the future Gorosei. Anybody we're expecting to encounter. Like, she is so tied into what seems like the end game of the story that if she's not involved, I honestly will be disappointed.
She already was pretty tied in with Saturn directly.
That might be her dad.
Yeah.
If she's not fleshed out, I think that's just going to be a huge waste of a character, because she has so many storylines you could pursue.
Yeah, he's done so much. I can't see Oda not going further with that.
Exactly. But into my next character, I only want to see them for one particular purpose, actually, and that's Koala. Koala's a great character. Not super insane. Obviously, being part of the revolution is interesting in itself. But this one is purely for the sake of my own fan service. I want to see adult Koala reunite with Jinbei. And I think it's very probable, either before the final end war that Oda's promised, or during, or maybe after, seeing the two of them reunite and just seeing how far they've come. Because I don't know if you remember this, but Jinbei, back when he was on Fisher Tiger's Fishman Pirates, was murdering humans.
Yeah, bad. Yeah, got a dark past.
He was not the best guy all the time. But he's come a super far way in seeing equality and value in every race of people. He's part of the Straw Hats crew. He's following a human captain. He gave a blood transplant to a human.
Yeah.
And Koala, she's not afraid anymore. She's living her own life, and she's fighting for freedom for everybody. Seeing that come back together would just be a very rewarding climax to both of their story arcs. And also, she keeps using Fishman Karate, so you know Jinbei would appreciate that.
Yeah, that's like an ode.
Can you imagine seeing them spar?
Oh, that'd be dope.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah.
But my final one, and we're staying in the Revolutionaries, I guess I have a type for this particular character.
Respect.
Is Ivankov. Ivankov is just one of the best characters in One Piece in general, in my opinion. From their visual inspiration being Rocky Horror Picture Show, being Frankenfurter, which is the movie my parents met at.
Oh, God.
I have a history tied into it. Plus, like, they changed up the dynamic entirely at Impel Down. They were like the Luffy of our group. They were the strongest fighter, the most renowned of that group. And then it just made a very interesting dynamic. But more than anything, during this flashback, I've really come to a love of Ivankov's character. From seeing them in their attitude towards life, just unashamed to live how they want, whenever they want, from wherever they're at. And then just working as a revolutionary, the ruler of Kamabaka, they're all over. They can do so many things. Similar to Bonnie, it's just such a well-rounded character I'd love to see more of.
Yeah, and has already had a huge impact on both Luffy and Sanji.
Absolutely. And Sabo. And
Sabo, yeah.
Like, Ivankov has been tied into so many things. It would almost just be a shame to not have Ivankov show up one more time, especially because you would imagine the revolutionaries being part of the final war. But, with that being said, I think that leads us to our last question, and probably the one that most people care about the most. Who is your personal favorite character in One Piece? And it seems we have a likewise way of thinking when it comes to this.
Man, it's gotta be Zoro.
It just makes more sense to me. I mean, it's not an uncommon character to pick. I think he's honestly the second favorite besides Luffy worldwide by popularity polls.
Yeah, that makes sense.
He's
just such a badass.
He is. No, he's the definition of badass. But I don't know, there's a lot to Zoro that doesn't necessarily present itself as being the fighter. His role in the crew is pretty straightforward. He shows up when he's got to mess stuff up, and otherwise, besides that, he's either drinking or sleeping or training.
He's got plenty of bits.
Yeah.
One is drinking. Also, the man is the absolute worst navigator. Absolute negative sense of direction. Could not get out of a one hallway. Yeah, like this guy is lost at all times. I love that about him. Also, he's really, outside of Sanji, really not like a braggadocious type. You know? He's just kind of chilling. He wants to be the greatest swordsman ever, and yet he's totally fine with just like chilling in the background until it's time to cut someone down.
Although his trash talk is elite.
Oh yeah,
like
he's got some crazy burns.
Fishman Island. I don't even remember the name of his opponent, but his finishing line was like, "You aren't even good enough to keep me from being bored." Like that. Oh,
that's crazy.
He's cold. He absolutely is. But what I think what I like about Zoro is that like he's straightforward. He's very easy to understand what he's about. Like you said, he wants to be the greatest swordsman. Everything he does kind of goes towards that. It makes sense. But yet, his dynamic within the crew itself adds a lot to the depth of his character. Not only his connection and loyalty to Luffy, but almost each and every character he's not very straightforward with how he connects to each of them, but you can tell there's something there.
Yeah. For me, I love his relationship with Chopper. He is that guy's big brother.
He's a stepdad.
Stepdad, big brother, like it's he's always watching. I love that moment in Wano where it's like, you got this? Yeah, I got this. My man.
No, they've come a long way. He also, I mean, even back in Alabasta, he was the one that talked to Chopper about joining the crew, and he's like, we're not, like, normal people. But even back then, like, from Baratie on, I don't think there's any member of the crew that's been more loyal to Luffy.
Absolutely. And to the point that he will often be the one to call Luffy out. Like the Usopp thing, when Usopp wanted to rejoin the crew, so much respect for him in that moment of, listen, we can't just let him back without him apologizing, because what would that make you as a captain if you're not going to hold your crew members accountable?
He is definitely more of the serious, I know the stakes type to Luffy's not serious captain.
Yes.
It's kind of like Shanks and Beckman, or all those balancing out with Rayleigh and or Roger.
Yeah.
It's necessary.
Yeah, you gotta have someone there who is willing, like, they always got your back, but they're also not afraid. They're not yes men. They're not afraid to tell you, hey, you can't do that, or you're in the wrong here. That you need to reconsider how you're doing this.
And a lot of people will say that he's harsh on Usopp for that kind of thing. You're right, it's necessary. You have to set that precedent of respect and not crossing and disrespecting the superior.
And it was important for Usopp too, because he's always been just kind of a, very happy-go-lucky, but in that moment he had to realize his mistake wasn't just something we can brush off. He had to own up in that moment and really take responsibility for what he'd done.
And it's not as though Zoro didn't want him to come back. I mean,
Right.
If you really want to get nitpicky, because my brain can do that, you can look at it, and Zoro told Luffy, if an apology is not the first thing out of his mouth that we hear, we won't take him back. You know Usopp was trying to come up with his lies and excuses and other stuff first, but you see Zoro and Luffy ignoring what he's saying, because Zoro himself still wants to have Usopp on the crew, but he doesn't want to break that promise, so he pretends he doesn't hear anything.
Yeah. He had to earn
He's still fighting for him, but in a silent way. And I think that's what I appreciate about his character, is he's always got an additional sense of, I do care for these people, I do care about for what I fight for, but I don't need to always tell you about that. I'm going to show you.
A lot of times it's just, he's sitting there stoic, but you can see it in his face. When Robin, declares, I want to live. Before that, you could see him, like, he didn't say anything, but he's looking up like, I want to hear it. And he was probably the least trusting of any of the crew members towards her. I think he was the last one to really come around.
He was always the one that had his wall up for her. Everyone else kind of gave in.
Yeah.
Within a minute.
Yeah.
But also, he is an interesting character in a lot of ways. Like we mentioned before, the dichotomy of having a lot to think about, but not saying a lot, or just not getting super involved, but when he does, he makes a huge impact. What I think I appreciate most about his character is that dichotomy between this super ambitious dream and drive, yet his ability to dedicate that towards something else that he views as a greater cause and more important to him. That's very hard to pull off, because those are two very strong motivations that should come in contrast, but seeing that humility from somebody who also wishes to have their name reach the heavens, like he says frequently, it adds a lot more to his character than just being so one-track.
I mean, think of the nothing happened moment.
Exactly.
He was willing to take on all of Luffy's pain and suffering, and then take no credit for it whatsoever.
He totally expected to die there.
He did. He was ready to die. I mean, he was also at the end of his fight with King. That man is fearless.
He is the king of hell.
King of hell, yeah. And, I mean, he also took a direct hit from both Big Mom and Kaido.
We're just going for cool factor now.
Yeah. That's the other part of it. It's like, he really is just badass.
I won't lie, the first One Piece merch I owned was definitely Zoro merch.
Respect.
So, I think we came to a conclusion on this one and kind of just wanted to hype up our boy a little bit.
Couldn't leave it out.
Give him some love. But we appreciate all the support we've been getting on the videos recently. We think we might start posting to Spotify for those of you who don't have the time to watch but want to give a listen to these kind of conversations as well.
Because we be spitting.
So make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe so you can come back for more content like this. And we will see you all next time.